I was triple-checking serial numbers on a Thursday morning shipment when I heard the notification ding that changed my life. 3 words. Subject line, town hall mandatory. That's when I knew something was off. No agenda, no context, just a calendar grenade lobbed from HR, landing right at 1 p.m. And when HR throws a surprise party, you're never the one getting cake. I was the only one in the company authorized to sign off on our ITER-controlled shipments. That's military-grade equipment with enough legal red tape to strangle a moose. I didn't get fancy bonuses or champagne Fridays, but I had something better: federal clearance and 9 years of clean audits. That morning, I'd already approved a batch of encrypted avionics headed to a NATO partner. Standard procedure: log the serials, verify the part codes, file the Federal Transmission Manifest. Boring to most, life or death to the feds. I wasn't flashy. Didn't go to the offsites or the whiskey tastings or whatever it is sales does in Vegas that gets HR write-ups on Monday mornings. But if you asked who kept this whole circus legally afloat, it was me. I was the invisible authority, the compliance firewall, the one who made sure our jets didn't end up in the wrong desert with the wrong flag painted on the side. And still, I had bills. A mom with late-stage dementia in a care facility that raises the rates every time they buy a new curtain. That's why, once a month, I consulted for a nonprofit that retrofits tech for veterans with mobility impairments. Totally legal, totally above board, and fully disclosed. I wasn't moonlighting for Lockheed Martin. I was helping a paralyzed guy fly a drone with his chin. The irony? My whole job was about keeping other people out of jail. And that's exactly what they risked the moment they fired me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning, I was sipping office-brewed mud that dared to call itself coffee, my inbox a battleground of federal acronyms, DFARS, IR, ITER, DDTC, when I checked the shipment roster. Everything cleared. All documents uploaded to the portal. One more shipment set for later that day. I felt calm. That quiet kind of calm that comes with knowing you're not flashy, not political, not gunning for a C-suite title that comes with ulcers and lawsuits. I had one job: keep us legal. And I did it better than anyone in this building even understood. Most folks didn't even know what ITER stood for. They just knew I had to bless their outgoing hardware like a priest in steel-toed boots. I didn't even sit near the execs. My cube was nestled between records and procurement, an unintentional metaphor for what I actually did: tie the past to the future without setting off a federal investigation. There was comfort in that anonymity. No one questioned me. No one noticed me. No one cared until they did. And hey, if you're listening to this and haven't hit that little subscribe button or tapped the like icon yet, now's a good time. It helps more than you know. Think of it like signing the export manifest for our story. Without it, we're just floating in the void. Plus, it keeps the team going, which, unlike HR, actually is a good thing. Now, back to the fire. The new HR director, Cynthia, had started 2 months ago. Corporate transplant. Liked buzzwords, hated process. I'd clocked her from day one as someone who measured productivity in decibels and slide decks, not results. She once told me compliance should be about storytelling. I told her compliance should be about not getting the company raided. She laughed like I was joking. She wasn't used to people like me. People who weren't trying to climb, just trying not to let anything collapse. She thought control lived in titles and Slack visibility. She had no idea it lived in obscure federal forms with names like DSB-5 and MOG 102, locked in air-gapped folders and time-stamped logs. That week had started normal. Tuesday, I signed off a batch of thermal scopes. Wednesday was a minor licensing quirk with a Swedish subcontractor. Thursday morning, shipments clear, docs filed. I was ahead of schedule for once. And then, the town hall, 1 p.m. sharp. We're all dialed in on Zoom like kindergartners waiting for recess. Cameras on, mics off. Cynthia appears, flanked by the CTO and someone from legal who looks like he's already aged 10 years. Good afternoon. She starts like she's auditioning for an internal podcast. Before we begin, I want to talk about values. Loyalty, alignment, integrity. Every buzzword that usually precedes a firing. Then she drops it, effective immediately. Sarah Willis is no longer with the company. We've discovered a conflict of interest stemming from external consulting activity. While legal, it's inconsistent with our values. We wish her well. Silence. 243 people on mute. A few mouths open. One guy gasps audibly. I'm staring at the screen like it's a Netflix true crime doc that just hit the murder reveal at the 10-minute mark. They fired me. On Zoom, in front of the company, for volunteering. I didn't say a word, didn't blink. Just opened my phone under the desk, pulled up Outlook, found the draft I'd written months ago but never needed until now. Subject: ITER license notification to Carl Mendoza. Compliance Officer Attachment. DDTC Form 7284. PDF 1 tap. Send. Then I clicked Leave Meeting. They thought they'd burn me in public. What they didn't know, they just lit a match in a dynamite shed labeled Export Control Violation, $1.2M fine per unit. You'd think if you were going to publicly execute someone's career in front of 200 coworkers, you'd at least let them finish their damn sandwich. But nope. I still had half a tuna melt sweating on my desk, untouched, when Cynthia decided to turn the monthly company-wide town hall into her own little loyalty tribunal. Before we begin Q3 metrics, she said, with that fake bright voice that always sounds like it's trying to sell you toothpaste, we need to talk about values. Oh good, I thought. Values like, don't ship radar tech to countries on the watch list kind of values, or don't terminate your only federally licensed export officer without a backup plan values. I sat up a little straighter in my chair. Gut instincts don't lie. Something was coming. She clicked her remote and the next slide was just my name. My full name, in size 64 font. Sarah Willis, termination notice. Let me tell you something. There's a specific type of silence that hits a Zoom call when 200 professionals collectively crap themselves. Not one cough, not one keyboard click. Even the background dogs and toddlers vanished into the void. Just that one moment of digital stillness, like the platform dropped from under me, and we were all waiting to see who'd hit the ground first. Cynthia's voice didn't crack. Of course it didn't. Effective immediately. Sarah Willis is no longer employed at Aegis Dynamics. She gave this little self-satisfied nod, like she just solved healthcare. While her external consulting work was technically legal, it was not aligned with our company culture. Real team players don't moonlight. Moonlight. That's what she called helping disabled veterans build adaptive controllers so they could play video games with their kids again. Moonlighting. I think I was doing lines of coke off a competitor's desk, the way she framed it. I could see my own face in the tiny corner of the Zoom window. Frozen, not with rage, with clarity. It was like someone turned off the emotional faucet and left only the pipes. Not one word came out of my mouth. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't remind them I disclosed the gig 6 months ago, got legal sign-off in writing. I didn't argue that I worked weekends and paid for a 501c3. I didn't even blink at the way they phrased it, disloyal, like I was some sort of spy in a cheap blazer. Instead, I reached for my phone, quietly, like I was adjusting my camera or muting a mic. I opened Outlook. The draft was already there. I'd written it ages ago, during one of those compliance drills that forces you to imagine worst-case scenarios. Mine, what happens if you're terminated without notice? Funny how theoretical disasters become tactical maneuvers with just one finger. 2. Carl Mendoza subject. Loss of named responsible party body. Per ITER requirement section 122.1c, I am notifying you that Aegis Dynamics no longer has a federally registered responsible party on file. Effective immediately. Attached, DDTC notification form for voluntary removal. Attach. Send. There. Less than 15 seconds. And just like that, the house of cards I'd been quietly holding up for 9 years was exposed to open air. Carl wouldn't yell, wouldn't even respond immediately. He's ex-military, calm as a tombstone. But I knew what was happening in his brain as soon as he got that email. I knew because he trained me. We both took the same oath to guard that export license like it was a nuclear football. We knew what the federal fines looked like. We knew what shipment violations did to a company's defense contracts. We knew what it meant to not have a named responsible party on file. It meant every shipment processed after 1:07 p.m. was now illegal under federal law. It meant every screw, every bolt, every encrypted microchip moving across a border without my signature was a $1.2 million mistake. And it meant someone, Cynthia, most likely, just nuked the company's entire compliance framework because she didn't like my LinkedIn side hustle. I left the Zoom call without fanfare. No goodbyes. No I'll miss you all. I didn't even close the window. I just walked out of the office, grabbed my coat, and left my badge on my desk. There wasn't anything theatrical about it. When you've just pulled the kill switch on a defense contractor's export license, you don't linger. The best part, didn't even slam the door. The real explosion was already on its way, silent, digital, and time-stamped. The parking lot was still half full when I walked out, sun bouncing off hoods like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even call my sister like I normally did after anything remotely dramatic. I just sat in my car, hands on the wheel, engine off, and stared at the windshield like it might offer up a reason. Nothing came, just a thin film of road dust and the faint echo of Cynthia's voice in my skull. Real team players don't moonlight. I wanted to laugh. Really, I did. As if this place hadn't been moonlighting on its own morals for years. They took millions in defense contracts, demanded blood-level loyalty, then fired the only person holding the legal keys to those contracts because, what? Ego? Optics. Because someone in HR wanted to look tough during budget season? My phone buzzed once, just once. I didn't look, I knew who it was. Carl, see that email I sent him? It wasn't just a heads up, it was a ticking clock. Under ITER law, when the only named responsible party is removed, voluntarily or otherwise, a company is required to immediately notify the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls. And during that limbo period, until a new person is vetted, registered, and approved by the DDTC, that company has zero legal authority to export a paperclip, let alone multi-million-dollar targeting modules. Carl was the only other person who knew what my removal meant in real time. The rest, they were about to find out the hard way. He didn't respond to the email. He didn't need to. I knew him. He'd have been sitting in his office, blinking twice, and standing so fast his chair clattered to the floor. Phone already in hand. Not to call me. No, that would be too late. He was calling legal. And legal was about to have a day. It was probably Susan who picked up, junior counsel. Smart, sharp, but fresh out of law school and still green on compliance. I could almost hear Carl's voice. We have a problem. Sarah just declared herself removed as our named responsible party. Susan, wait, what? Carl, she was terminated. Susan, but we don't have a replacement yet. I thought we were onboarding someone, Carl. Nope. Nobody's registered. Nobody's cleared. Susan, oh my God. Yeah, oh my God, indeed. Meanwhile, I sat in my car, watching the breeze shake a plastic grocery bag across the asphalt like some kind of cosmic joke. The bag floated up, caught on a shrub, and hung there, stuck, limp, and slowly deflating. Just like this company was about to. My keycard still worked. I thought about that for a second. I could walk back in if I wanted, could pretend nothing had happened. HR probably hadn't even deactivated my badge yet. They moved fast on public humiliation, slow on back-end procedures. Typical, but I didn't go back in. There was nothing left to say. No cardboard box of sad desk plants to collect. No dramatic final stare down. Just one building full of people who hadn't realized yet that the lights were about to shut off from the inside. My email was still open on my phone. I refreshed. No response. No, we made a mistake. No apology. Not that I expected one, but still, that silence was heavy. Then another buzz. This one, different. A forwarded message from Carl. Just the header. No text. Just a CC list that included legal, compliance, and the VP of operations. Subject line, urgent, license nullification risk. Boom, that was the echo I'd been waiting for. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and drove with the windows down, wind knotting my hair and clearing the last dregs of numbness from my chest. I wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. I was sharp, focused, controlled. They thought I'd go quietly, that I'd vanish into the HR ether like a mistake in a spreadsheet. But the thing about legally binding compliance structures, they don't vanish. And neither do the people who built them. Replacing a named responsible party isn't like hiring a new project manager or bringing an attempt to order toner. It's a federally overseen process that takes weeks, sometimes months, especially for a company with classified projects and international exports. You can't just slap a new name on the paperwork and call it a day. That name has to be vetted, background checked, cleared, and approved by multiple government agencies. Until then, you're frozen, which meant every shipment they pushed out that morning, every box stamped with a destination, every serial number linked to a weapons system or encrypted firmware was now radioactive. I didn't need to swing a hammer. I was the hammer. All I had to do was stop holding the structure up. The rest would fall on its own. It took them 3 hours to figure out what I already knew the second I hit send. Somewhere around 4 p.m., the leadership team barricaded themselves in conference room C. I'd spent 9 years in that building, and I could tell from the shadows through the frosted glass who was in there. Carl, pacing. Legal, 3 deep, Susan, the old general counsel, and that outside guy they only called in when SEC language showed up in the margins. Ops, hunched and confused. And of course Cynthia, who now looked like a toddler who'd just found out the stove was hot after all. Carl must have started with the basics. Without a named responsible party, every shipment processed post-termination is non-compliant under ITER. That means they're not just at risk, they're illegal. He'd say it like that too, slow, measured, because Carl doesn't panic. But everyone else in that room sure as hell did. It already cleared at least 5 shipments that morning. 2 to NATO contractors, 1 to a subcontractor in Japan, and 1 particularly spicy crate of encrypted RF boards heading to an undisclosed site in Eastern Europe. All with my signature, because at the time I was still authorized. But the minute they severed me and failed to reassign or re-register anyone else, game over. $1.2 million fine per violation. And that was just the base rate. If the feds decided to make an example out of them, which they tend to do when export licenses get mishandled by defense contractors, those fines would stack faster than interest on a payday loan. What no one in that glass panic room could fix was time. There's no undo button when you remove your federally licensed compliance officer. No grace period. No do-over. Once you yank the foundation, everything above it starts wobbling. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my couch, legs folded under me, a lukewarm cup of tea in hand, watching an episode of Jeopardy I'd seen twice already. I wasn't trying to be smug. I wasn't even celebrating. I was decompressing, peeling off 9 years of forced calm like a second skin. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. I let it buzz once more, then answered. This is Sarah. Hi, Miss Willis. I'm Sarah Klein from Newton & Bell. I represent Centurion Systems. You're probably familiar with them. Centurion? Yeah, familiar was one word for it. They were our biggest competitor in avionics export logistics. Rumor was they'd been trying to poach me for over a year, but I always shut it down. I had loyalty. At least I had it. Klein continued. I won't take much of your time. I'm reaching out because we understand you're no longer with Aegis Dynamics. I'd like to discuss an opportunity to bring you on as our named responsible party. Just like that. No games, no preamble. They knew what I was, knew what had happened. They probably had an alert set up for every DDTC change in status. Hell, maybe they even had someone inside Aegis whispering. We'd offer full relocation, signing bonus, and assume the cost of the registration transfer. Our license portfolio is ready. Been waiting for a candidate like you. I didn't say yes, not yet. But I didn't say no either. I just told her I'd think about it, thanked her for her time, and ended the call. Then I set the phone down and exhaled for the first time all day. Not a sigh, a release. Like my lungs had been packed in bubble wrap since the town hall and someone had finally popped the last layer. Back at Aegis, I could picture the slow-motion disaster unfolding like a boardroom opera. Legal flipping through export manifests, scrambling to contact the freight teams. Compliance pulling every file I'd ever signed, trying to divine whether there was some obscure clause they could use to patch the gaping hole where my signature used to be. They'd find nothing. No backup signer. No contingency plan. Cynthia had cut me loose without consulting a single person in that chain. Now they were walking barefoot across a minefield I used to map out for them in weekly memos they never read. I got another email. This one from someone in logistics, Mark. I think his name was. Mid-level, always nice in the break room. Subject, hey, what's going on? No body, just that. A digital whisper in the middle of corporate collapse. I didn't respond, because this wasn't my storm to explain. I was just the wind that left. They were the ones who tore out the foundation and built a bonfire on top of the gas line. And somewhere, midair between Cincinnati and Berlin, a shipment of avionics parts was currently flying blind through a legal nightmare. Because nobody had bothered to ask what would happen if I left. Now they knew. By Monday morning, the ripple had become a riptide. I wasn't on the inside anymore. But when you've spent nearly a decade managing the pulse of place, you know how to read the rhythm, even from outside the building. The company's Slack channels went quieter than usual, their job postings for compliance analyst urgent went live, and the usually smug director of ops deleted his LinkedIn header that said, keeping shipments moving fast. Not fast anymore, are they, Dan? The first domino didn't fall with a crash. It came in the form of an email. A client, mid-tier aerospace firm we'd supplied for years, sent a polite but firm message to their account manager. As part of our quarterly controls review, please provide your updated export license documents for Q4. We're reconciling all vendor records to ensure ITAR alignment. Sounds routine. Is routine. It happens every 3 months like clockwork, and every time before the process was simple. I'd bundle the DDTC confirmations, renewal records, named party designation, and signature logs, drop it in a tidy PDF and send it with a bow. One click. Compliance karma cleared, but this time, there was no one to click, no named party, no legal authorization. Legal stalled. They drafted some vague reply about pending updates to internal systems and promised the documents were in process for delivery, which is like saying you're pregnant with a PDF. It doesn't work that way. These clients know the game. They have compliance officers too. Those officers live and breathe on the presence or absence of official clearance. Carl, bless him, didn't say a word, but he saw it all. Every excuse logged, every document delayed, every shipment paused. I knew he had a spreadsheet open on his second monitor, timestamping each misstep, each missed notification, each lie HR was feeding into the pipeline. Meanwhile, Cynthia was spinning harder than a politician in an ethics hearing. Her new line, from what I heard secondhand, was, "We've already got a new candidate lined up. It's a formality. Except the DDTC database doesn't care about promises, it cares about registration. And their online portal, which is publicly viewable if you know where to look, still had my name, struck through, no replacement listed. License status, pending responsible party. That's government speak for you're dead in the water." Somewhere around noon, another client pinged. One of the big ones, the kind that sends 7-figure checks and expects you to sweat gratitude when they call. They didn't even bother being polite. "We need full export compliance documentation by COB today or we'll be placing payments on hold." That's the phrase that makes C-suite sweat through their tailored shirts, placing payments on hold. Not canceling, not suing, just pausing. But in this business, a pause is death by cash flow strangulation. One freeze leads to another, and pretty soon you're not just bleeding, you're drowning in your own unpaid invoices. The VP of sales, who once told me my signature was just a formality, now found himself chasing a formality like a man clawing at a locked vault door. He couldn't unlock anything. I'd been the vault key, the legal linchpin, the quiet woman with the government login credentials, and the muscle memory to file the right doc at the right time. And I was gone. I imagine Cynthia tried to distract the execs with hollow updates. "We've got a strong candidate pipeline. The interviews are progressing well." She probably left out the part where none of them had active federal clearance. You don't just apply to be a named responsible party like you're joining a country club. There's vetting, background checks, security clearance, and it's not fast. Weeks minimum. Longer if there are flagged issues. And guess what? There are always flagged issues. From my vantage point, Quiet, removed, sipping coffee from the warmth of a home I hadn't spent enough time in during the last decade, I watched their carefully constructed house of glass buckle. Emails came to my personal account. Quiet ones from old colleagues, from vendors, one from a former intern. Hey, everything okay over there? They said you left voluntarily? I didn't reply. That night, I got a notification that Centurion Systems had filed a change request in the DDTC registry. They were moving to appoint a new responsible party. Me, nothing flashy, just a system update, but it said everything. They were ready to move, and Aegis, they were still scrambling to find someone with a clean enough background to get past the first layer of vetting. I didn't smile. I didn't drink champagne. But I did close my laptop and sit in silence, watching the sun dip behind the trees, knowing exactly what kind of darkness was now creeping over the building I'd once called mine. They thought they could fire me and keep moving. But when you fire the foundation, the whole structure starts to lean. And now, one by one, the contracts were following me out the door. They always think they can undo it. Like there's some universal control plus Z for bureaucratic disaster. Emergency meetings started at 8:30 sharp the next morning. Not because that's when people were ready, but because that's when Carl told them to sit the hell down. He wasn't asking anymore. He didn't bother with a PowerPoint. Just walked into the room with a single legal pad, flipped to the second page and said, "We have 14 shipments in violation of ITER, each carrying a federal penalty of $1.2 million. Silence, not the awkward kind. The kind that makes grown executives stop breathing. 14 units. $1.2 million per violation. Do the math. That's $16.8 million in federal fines, and that's if the feds play nice, which they never do when the acronym DUD shows up in your contracts and your compliance logs look like wet paper." Someone, probably the VP of Ops, tried to argue, but those were signed off before she left, right? Carl didn't flinch. Only the first 3. The rest were processed after Sarah's termination, which makes them unauthorized exports under ITER Section 127.1a. Criminal and civil penalties apply, and they don't care who pushed the button. They care that the signature on file no longer exists. He let that sit, that word, criminal. Then the CEO stood. I'd met him only twice in my 9 years, once in the elevator, once at the Christmas party where he forgot my name halfway through the sentence. Now, apparently I had his full attention. "What do we need to do to reinstate her?" he barked. Carl didn't look up from the pad. "We can't." "Why the hell not?" "Because you terminated her under cause, publicly. Her license clearance was tied to her employment. You'd have to start from scratch, resubmit her as a new applicant. That takes time." "How much time?" Carl finally looked up. "Weeks. Minimum, assuming she agrees." Which, given the circumstances, he didn't finish the sentence. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment 2 cities away, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Buzzed again. Left a voicemail this time. I didn't listen to it. Third call. Different number. Still didn't pick up. By the time the 4th call came in, I'd already turned the phone face down and opened a book. The calls weren't going to change the facts, and they weren't about me. Not really. They were about cleaning up the mess someone else made by yanking out the cornerstone and hoping the house would hold. I didn't owe them anything. No explanation. No rescue mission. No 11th hour swoop in to be the savior. Because the truth is I was never a hero. I was a firewall, a very quiet, very tired firewall, and they'd kicked me out without asking what I was holding back. Now they were about to learn. Back in that meeting room, legal tried to offer some lifeline. Can we retroactively assign someone else as the responsible party? Carl just blinked at her. "Are you suggesting we falsify a federal export document?" She went quiet. The CFO, who'd been chewing his pen like it owed him money, piped up. "Isn't there any emergency mechanism, like interim authorization?" Carl nodded, but not the way they wanted. Only if the DDTC pre-approves, and we never filed for interim succession. Sarah was listed as the sole responsible party. Full stop, that phrase again, full stop. Someone suggested hiring a contractor with active clearance, but that's like suggesting you swap out your heart with a stranger's in the middle of a jog. It doesn't work like that. Background checks, clearance transfer, registry updates, notification timelines, and yes, new fingerprint cards submitted to the feds. Every step takes time. Precious time they didn't have. Meanwhile, I made lunch, turkey sandwich. Little mustard, pickles on the side. I ate slowly, deliberately, while they were probably flipping through org charts like tarot cards trying to summon anyone who could plug the hole. Spoiler alert, there wasn't anyone. I'd been the last line of defense because no one else wanted the responsibility. They all liked to benefit from the export license, but none of them wanted to own it. And now that ownership had teeth. Carl, for his part, was documenting everything. Every question, every misstep, every time someone in the room used the word maybe when discussing federal violations. I wouldn't be surprised if he already had a folder labeled potential litigation shield. The CEO finally snapped. "We have to get her back." Carl shrugged. "She's already been listed as removed. Her name was stricken from the registry. It's a matter of public record now, unless she agrees to start over. And we expedite, she's functionally radioactive until the process completes." The CEO looked around the room like someone was going to offer him a magic wand. No one did, because there wasn't one. The last voicemail they left that day said something like, "We'd love to talk. We think there may have been a misunderstanding. We're very open to collaboration." That word, collaboration. Funny how quickly disloyal becomes essential when your revenue stream depends on it. I never called back. The view from Centurion's 12th floor wasn't glamorous, just a parking garage and a strip of trees that tried real hard to pretend they weren't boxed in by traffic, but it was mine. The badge clipped to my blazer had weight. Literal weight. New RFID chip, fresh lamination, different logo. But more than that, it symbolized something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. Not revenge, not satisfaction, not triumph, just control. I'd taken the call 2 days after the last voicemail. Sarah Klein, their legal counsel, didn't waste my time. She had a draft employment contract, relocation stipend, and this is what mattered, a fast-tracked DDTC registration packet with Centurion's compliance officer already prepping my transfer documentation. They didn't ask me to interview. They asked me to lead. Within 48 hours, my name was in the queue. Iter lead had been nearing retirement anyway. They wanted someone sharper, hungrier, someone who understood how fragile the whole system was, how fast it could all go to hell if you let HR treat your legal linchpin like yesterday's lunch order. Centurion handed me a welcome packet, one of those glossy folders with stock photos of smiling engineers and slogans like precision with purpose. Normally, I'd toss it, but this time I kept it, because on the final page, under key assignments was a single line: primary designated responsible party effective upon DDTC confirmation. They weren't just giving me a desk, they were giving me the whole foundation. Again, my office had a door that closed, a window, no motivational posters, no whiteboard cluttered with acronyms, just peace. They asked if I needed an assistant. I said no. They asked if I wanted to bring in my own systems. I said yes. They didn't blink. They didn't micromanage. They just handed me the keys and said, "Keep us clean." Meanwhile, across town, Aegis Dynamics was learning the cost of arrogance, one contract at a time. The first to walk was Atlas Defense, a legacy partner who'd been quietly losing faith in Aegis since Q2. The pause in payment had turned into a full-blown cancellation once their legal team realized the export license gap. They'd rerouted their contract. Word was, they moved it to a competitor with stable compliance infrastructure. I didn't ask, but I had a hunch. Second to go was Lancer Technologies. Smaller, but loud. Their CEO blasted Aegis on LinkedIn with one of those weaponized posts dressed as corporate concern: "We value security and stability in all partnerships." A sudden shift in export compliance status gave us no choice. That post got 12,000 views in 24 hours. Internally, someone must have finally told Cynthia. I imagine it happened like this: Carl walking into her office, no knock, just the folder in hand, dropping it on her desk. These two just walked, more pending. Cynthia blinking, "But we're working on Sarah's replacement." Carl, flat as a brick wall, "Doesn't matter. Contracts don't wait." She probably started stammering, probably mentioned optics or messaging, maybe even tried to blame legal. But the noose was tightening and she could feel it. She'd fired me with a smile and a prepared statement. Now there were no statements left, just silence. Legal silence. Revenue silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't leak. There was nothing satisfying about watching something I helped build decay from the inside. I didn't want it to collapse. I just wanted them to treat people like we weren't disposable. And yet, every email I got from an old coworker, every ping saying, "I can't believe this is happening," every quiet apology slid into my inbox like a breadcrumb. They all confirmed the same thing: they knew they'd messed up. Not just legally. Humanly. One message stood out: a junior in operations. "Sweet kid, smart, always asked good questions." She wrote, "They told us you were disloyal. But honestly, you were the only one who told the truth." That stuck with me. By Friday, I got word that a federal audit request had been filed. I wasn't the one who filed it, but I knew how it worked. Once the DDTC detects anomalies in shipment logs, especially with high-volume exports during a known personnel gap, they don't just knock. They come with questions, and they bring calculators with a lot of zeros. I didn't cheer. But I did sit in my new office, sip fresh coffee from a mug that didn't have the company logo on it, and watch a bird land on the ledge outside my window. It stayed for a second, flew off, no drama, just movement, just freedom. That's what this felt like: not revenge, not victory, just flight. The audit notice didn't arrive with sirens. It landed in their inboxes on a Tuesday morning like a polite dagger wrapped in bureaucratic velvet. Subject: Notice of Compliance, Review ITER Export Activity. Q4 from Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, DDTC, to Aegis Dynamics Executive Compliance Team. That's all it took. One PDF attachment, 3 pages, requesting detailed export logs, responsible party verification history, shipment manifests, customs declarations, DDTC correspondence, and evidence of internal compliance protocols from the past 90 days. Oh, and a signature from the current named responsible party. Except there wasn't one, and that audit, it wasn't optional. I didn't learn about it from a press release or a headline. I heard it from someone still inside, a former colleague who'd risked a lot just to whisper, "They're spiraling." You were the trigger, but Cynthia lit the fuse. What they didn't realize when they fired me was that paperwork has a memory. Federal systems don't just update, they log every change, every gap, every timestamp that proves whether you were compliant or faking it. Turns out, when the DDTC opened up the logs, they found a perfect little window: 14 shipments, post-termination, no responsible party on file. It practically screamed, investigate, so they did. I imagined the meeting where Carl dropped the audit notice onto the conference table. Probably said nothing for a long beat, just let the cover page sit there like a loaded gun. Then came the unraveling. Legal started reviewing the chain of emails leading up to my firing. And what did they find? No approval chain, no review, no legal sign-off, not even a Kersey Lupin. Just one line from Cynthia, timestamped 4 hours before the town hall. Let's clean house, we don't need her. Another email, this one to the comms team, outlined the internal messaging. Frame it as a cultural misalignment, spin the narrative, make it look voluntary, but there was nothing voluntary about it. And now that internal audit logs were subpoenaed, the truth wasn't just leaking, it was printing itself in black and white. The CFO tried to play dumb, claimed he hadn't been briefed on the personnel change, that he assumed legal had been consulted. But Carl had receipts. Every internal memo, every policy doc, every compliance update I'd ever sent had his initials on them. When the DDTC asked for the timeline of who knew what and when, Carl didn't blink. He forwarded the full document history to the investigators. And with that, the walls started sweating. Aegis's leadership issued a company-wide email titled Ongoing Collaboration with Federal Partners. It read like a hostage letter. We're confident in our protocols. We welcome this opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to compliance. But behind the scenes, the bleed had turned arterial. Multiple clients had already pulled payment. Vendors were now demanding certification updates before fulfilling orders. Investors were calling emergency board sessions. And according to one very reliable whisper, Cynthia had stopped showing up to the office entirely. On personal leave, they said. Translation: she saw the wave coming and ducked behind HR protocol like it could save her. Meanwhile, I sat at a long table on the 23rd floor of a Hilton conference center, bottled water sweating under soft lights, watching the moderator smile. Up next, she announced, a panel on preventing catastrophic compliance failure in regulated exports. Our next guest is someone who understands this intimately. Please welcome Sarah Willis, ITER Compliance Lead at Centurion Systems. Applause, nothing thunderous, just enough to feel real. I walked up, thanked the moderator, and sat. I spoke for 20 minutes about structural risk, personnel gaps, and the critical failure of treating legal compliance like a PR problem instead of federal mandate. I never mentioned Aegis by name. Didn't need to. Everyone knew. The news was already circling on the defense subcontractor forums. One headline read, Major Supplier Under Federal Audit After Firing Key Compliance Officer Subtle. Brutal. Accurate. After the panel, few folks came up to shake my hand. One offered a consulting gig. Another just nodded and said, glad you're still in the game. I thanked them all, smiled faintly, because I didn't need revenge. I had records. And in this business, records talk louder than rage. The boardroom at Aegis Dynamics had seen its share of bad meetings, missed targets, late launches, the occasional hush-hush NDA disaster, but nothing like this. The government rep didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His badge spoke louder than any PowerPoint deck in the building. His tone was clinical, like a surgeon about to cut into a patient without anesthesia. Let's be clear, he said, flipping a single sheet of paper from a thick file. Every unit exported following the removal of your named responsible party is in violation of 22 CFR Section 127.1. You had no legal authority to move product during that window. You did anyway. 14 shipments. Total estimated liability, he paused, $18.6 million pending further review. Silence, the kind that vibrates. Nobody blinked. The CEO sat pale and motionless. Legal shifted uncomfortably in their leather seats, flipping pens between fingers like they could twirl their way out of accountability. Carl, stoic as ever, kept his eyes locked on the rep. He didn't flinch because he knew. Then came the question. Who, the rep asked evenly, approved the termination of Sarah Willis? Every neck in the room turned like choreography, one synchronized pivot. All eyes landed on the far end of the table on Cynthia. She looked smaller than usual, less sculpted, less certain. The light from the projector washed her out, making her blouse look ghost white, like a uniform she hadn't earned. Her mouth opened, just a sliver. Maybe to blame someone else, maybe to pretend it had been a collective decision, maybe to summon one last line of PR-polished BS. But legal didn't let her. We'll handle it, the general counsel said quickly, almost too quickly, voice cutting through like a scalpel. No further comments. Translation, stop talking before we both drown, and that was it. No fireworks, no screaming. Just that one question and the slow, irreversible descent into fallout. Didn't hear about the boardroom scene until later that evening, when a colleague from Centurion forwarded me a screenshot from an internal defense contractor newsletter. One line stood out. Centurion Systems awarded $92M contract originally held by Aegis Dynamics. Just like that. No ceremony, no warning. The contract Aegis had been grooming for months, now hours. My new team had been quietly bidding, their proposal clean and fully compliant. And with Aegis under active federal audit and bleeding credibility, the client didn't hesitate. They didn't even ask questions, they just transferred. Across town, I was in my new office, badge clipped to my lapel, signature logged into the DDTC portal. The screen in front of me displayed the final clearance checklist for our outgoing shipment, a thermal optics module destined for NATO partner. All boxes checked. Compliance status, active responsible party. Sarah Willis. I moved the mouse to the final field, clicked authorize, and just like that I signed off on the first export from my new home. Legally sound, fully vetted, untouchable. Outside the window, the city kept moving. Cars, trains, people unaware that somewhere between silence and bureaucracy, an empire had quietly collapsed under its own arrogance. I didn't pop champagne, didn't toast to karma, but I did lean back in my chair, closed the file, and exhaled, because they hadn't just fired me. They'd removed the one name that held their entire foundation together, and in doing so, they hadn't ended my career. They detonated their own. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.